This is one of their mobile kitchens that they actually...
Is that even some, what I call habitual...
Beautiful Stop and Shop in the Wilton. Penalty, but it was actually a tax, and that it... Absolutely. What's the name of the show? Good evening and welcome once again to the Marty Heiser Show. You know, if you were in a cave somewhere last week, you might not have known that across this country, high school students participated in a walkout from school. Some of it said that it was for 17 minutes, representing the 17 students that were gunned down in Parkland, Florida. My understanding, and Tyler and Natalia from Ridgefield High School can confirm this or deny it, as well as Matt, but I believe this started with the initiative from a Ridgefield High School student, and it swept across the country. You saw all across the news high school kids taking the matter into their own hand, walking out in protest over gun violence in the school and what has to be done. So tonight, I'm privileged to have high school students from Newtown High School, as well as Ridgefield High School, just to tell their story and to say what's motivating them and why they decided to take this protest on, and in their own words, tell us what they're hoping to accomplish as a result of this. And we have Jenny. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Garrett and Matt, and then Tyler and Natalia. And why don't I start with you? You seem to be very confident and full of vim and vigor. But what was your motivation behind this, and how did it all come together?
Well, I think my motivation behind joining the Junior Newtown Action Alliance in the beginning was that after a while...
Hold on. What is it called?
The Junior Newtown Action Alliance. So that's
Newtown Action Alliance, which was an outgrowth of the Newtown shooting, what, 4 years ago now?
5 years ago.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So out of the Newtown Action Alliance, the high schoolers started a club, and that's called Junior Newtown Action Alliance. So that's a similar goals in mind to like end gun violence in America, but more for high school students. Okay. So what motivated me to join that was, I think that after a while you kind of realize that this wasn't, because I remember after Sandy Hook 5 years ago, that was the first bad thing that ever happened in my life. So I think that, well,
so 5 years ago, if you don't mind me asking,
no.
But how old were you 5 years ago?
I was 11.
11 years old, okay.
Yes.
So this hit home. I mean,
Yes,
how did
completely.
you process that as an 11-year-old?
Well, I think it was very shocking, and it still is very shocking, but I think everyone out there can say that you don't really talk to your kids under 11, about issues like this. And so every time like something bad would come on the news or anything, my parents would constantly flip the channel, or like the radio would come on and it would constantly be changed, just because, you don't want to expose your children, I think, to stuff like this. But then it ended up coming to our school, and you can't hide that. You can't hide that there's 26 missing people from your town, especially in such a close-knit town like Newtown. Yeah. So I think that after, that was, as I said before, like the first real bad thing that happened in my life personally. So I think that like as time went on, I kind of thought it was almost like a fluke in the system, like stuff like that doesn't happen. Yeah. But then you started seeing, especially in the past few years, this trend of shooting after shooting after shooting in high schools, and you kind of saw that the commonality between them all was this assault weapon. So I think that after that, I kind of realized that something needs to be done, and there's something more to be done than just sitting back and thinking, oh, this is just another tragedy, because it's not. There's an obvious trend here, and I think that's what we need to, talk about.
Wow. Garrett, your thoughts? Do you concur? I would advise you to agree.
I completely agree with Jenny. It really affected the whole town, and as kids in Newtown, personally, I moved away, but I know there was sort of a gag order going around town, and no one really wanted to talk about it, this kind of thing with their kids, because it's such a sensitive issue. But now we're finally at an age where we can talk about it, and our schools and our society has found it acceptable to voice your opinions publicly. And now that we're almost going to be able to vote, my friends are going to be able to vote in literally months, we have literal power, and we can decide who will pass bills in the government. And it's not just that we didn't have a voice before, it's that there was sort of a precedent set to not do anything after tragedies happened, because there was always prayers and thoughts going out, but never, after a while, we kind of just gave up. And now with Parkland, with the kids of Parkland, that it's been reignited, and I really feel like this is the time that things are going to change. This is the time that things can change.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about the new town, what happened at Sandy Hook School. You have, and I don't mean to stalk you, cyber stalk you, but I looked at your Facebook page, and you had a link from Mrs. Hockley, I believe it was, who lost their son at
she lost her
Newtown.
son.
And she gave kind of a testimonial to you, almost like the younger generation coming and taking up the challenge of school shootings and random violence like that. Do you know, you posted it, right?
Yeah,
you know the one
I
I'm
did.
talking
That
about.
it really inspired me when powerful people like that, important people with a real voice, whether it's the community, the nation, or the world, when they encourage us, it's a call to action that can't be ignored.
Wow. Inspirational. Matt, what's your motivation? And did I get that at all right, that this kind of started with a student at Ridgefield High School, right?
Yes, I believe it was Lane Murdoch.
Murdoch, yeah.
Yeah, she's a sophomore, I believe, and yeah, this all started through her. She made the school, our school walkout, and it sort of spread, you know, like a trickle effect to all the other high schools across the nation. Now you see this nationwide movement protesting
It's
gun violence.
unbelievable, isn't it? I mean, the way things can just grow like wildfire like that.
Yeah, and throughout much of my life, I thought that like I was powerless, and that like as a kid, I really don't have a say in what happens in our government. And these recent protests made me realize that if I make my voice heard, like someone will listen, and if I keep that voice going, like I can make a change. So just recently, like, you know, I started posting on Facebook my opinions, my thoughts, and like spreading words to my friends about like what needs to be done. I even emailed our senators, Chris Murphy and Blumenthal, about my thoughts and like what should be done. And so I don't know how to put it, but it's almost as if this inspired me, you know, to like have a say in my government.
Wow.
And you know, make my voice heard.
I'll tell you, when you sit back and you watch, I mean, cable news and all the different, it started with Parkland. It started with the students at Parkland. And you got up there and they would have like 3 football players, and then you have the ROTC group, and then you have, you know, this one guy who's kind of the spokesman, and he had done a video out in California, just happened to be down there, but he was kind of everywhere, kind of a handsome young guy. But it really seemed like you were hearing from the younger generation, and specifically in these school shootings, like, hey, we're getting gunned down. Something's got to change.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see you guys spontaneously coming together and giving voice to it. Tyler, what's your motivation? And is this, what is it, Murdoch? What was her name?
Lane Murdoch.
Lane Murdoch. I think we had talked with, she really kind of got the whole thing started.
Yeah.
Wow. But what's your motivation behind it? And thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, so being a part of the school that this entire movement spread from, it may seem almost ironic that I did not participate in the walkout. And it's not because I don't feel any empathy or sympathy for the people who suffered such tragic events, that I can only hope that myself and my friends and family will never have to go through something so tragic. I believe that the walkout, not in our schools specifically, but nationally, has this connotation for strong gun reform that I may not agree with. So I have a lot of opinions on that I hope to discuss about what the most effective ways are. I don't think gun control is the most efficacious way to solve the gun violence in America. And I have other opinions about how we can improve security. Armed teachers is something that a lot of people have talked about, and there's a lot of disagreement with. I don't agree entirely with it, but there's a lot of kind of improvements to security that I believe should be made that will be the most effective way to mitigate this sort of gun violence in our schools across the country.
That's interesting to me, because that was one of the part of my research about it. Maryland school officer stops armed students who shot 2 others. This happened since Parkland.
Yeah.
Since Parkland. And yet they had armed security officers at Parkland, but they kind of cowered outside, or there's a whole dispute over that. But my sense is, and don't let me put words into your mouth, but would you say that you are very anti-gun, and if we just got rid of these terrible assault weapons, everything would be okay? Is that overstating it? Or?
I think that's, Personally, I believe that a gun was made to kill, and I think that's a pretty fair statement, I believe. So I think that it's not so much that I believe that no one in this world should have a gun, because I don't technically believe that, but I think that if it's to have the power to end someone's life is an extreme, that's like an almost godly power. So I think that if you were to have that power, you need to be someone who has the specific type of training and who has enough years of experience, enough, like almost self-control, I think, to be able to control that power, because that is that's something that should not be taken lightly. And so I think that it's not necessarily that all of us students are exactly like, clean out the guns from the community. I think we're more like, you know what, we think that your average citizen should not have access to a gun, and that's what we're seeing more and more these days, that it's not necessarily the people who are, who go through gun training and go through like, I don't know, whatever, but it's the people who don't do that, the people who just spontaneously get guns.
Okay, we probably have a different view in the back, but it's just great that we're hearing this from the younger generation. But Natalia, what's your motivation behind participating, and what did you get out of it?
Okay, so I think that the school walkout was very good in that it kind of made people like highlight and define their opinions on the gun debate issue. But I personally, just like Tyler, did not participate in the walkout because I think it did have a very strong, even though in our school we had the whole lap of love and the focus was on just remembering the lives that were lost. I think that the March 14th walkout, because that date was set by the organizers of the Women's March and because there was a very strong connotation of needing like gun reform and gun control, I personally don't share that same stance, and I'm very pro-gun and pro-Second Amendment, so I did not want to participate in it.
Did you get any pushback for that from faculty, teachers, other students? Did they say, come on, get on the bandwagon, we want to, have increased gun control?
Yeah, so gladly I didn't get anything from teachers, thank God, but I got stuff from students. They were very quick to judge. It was almost as if people said like that because I was pro-gun and because I did not want to go to the walkout that I didn't want to remember the lives that were lost, which is a completely ridiculous like judgment by other people. But they were very quick to judge on the reasons why you did not want to participate in the walkout.
Because it's funny, because you folks are putting your toe into a very contentious debate.
Yes.
Yes.
Rural, urban, pro-gun, anti-gun, all of those different debate items. So you're coming in, and it's sort of like the anti-gun lobby's like, hey, come on in, let's get you registered to vote, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
You have the pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment that are saying, hey, why are you, villainizing most of America? Legal gun owners haven't done anything, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is a call-in show, so people can call in. And by the way, the mayor is out there. He might join the discussion too. But caller, do you have a question for our guests? Jenny, Garrett, Matt, Natalia, and Tyler from Newtown High School and Ridgefield High School. Go right ahead.
Marty, great panel. Just a couple of comments to make. First, isn't every gun by definition kind of an assault weapon, kind of like a baseball bat could be, or like paper cutters that were used on 9/11 to take down the World Trade Centers? And wasn't the Second Amendment intended to guard against tyrannical governments? And without the Second Amendment, do you even have a Constitution? What protects the Constitution? And then the last thing is, if you take away guns like the Germans did for the Jews, how'd that end for the Jews?
Okay, good. Thank you for that. That's kind of the classic pro-gun. I mean, what they would say, the gun, they would say, hey, we just had bombs going off in Austin. I mean, this is like stuff that's happened 12 hours ago.
Yes.
I mean, this thing that happened, the Maryland shooting, school shooting,
days ago.
happened since the Parkland thing. So it's like playing itself out, like the only thing to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Or in this case, he would say that, one guy used bombs, pipe bombs, and things like that. Is the gun itself the real problem? Let's ask you and then your friend.
In my honest opinion, I do not think it's the gun. If someone is set with a twisted, evil mindset, they can accomplish that means with like any way necessary. And a lot of people are out here like blaming the assault weapon, And in fact, Virginia Tech was done with pistols, not assault weapons, and 10-round magazines, which is what so many people call it for. Columbine was done with shotguns. And our worst massacre in recent United States history was with a plane. So while I am pro-gun, I am pro-gun control, because there are some measures that we can enact that will prevent these acts of violence. But if you think about it, really, a gun is an inanimate object. It's what the person does with it, really.
Interesting. You might disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, go right ahead.
I think that there's a common debate between, like, is it mental health or is it gun? And I don't think that should be the two questions on the table. Because if you're someone with mental health, then with a mental health issue, you're not capable of doing the same. I mean, I saw a post on Facebook a few days ago saying that, like, in Norway, I believe, that there was someone mentally disturbed and they came in with a knife. And the students were able to all, like, throw backpacks at him, and it scared him away because he had a knife and not a gun. So I think that it's not necessarily that the person, I think that there are evil people out there, but I think if you give the evil person the power to use a weapon if you give the evil person the necessary means of which they could go carry out whatever they're thinking of, then that is the problem. So it's not necessarily like, because they're mentally disabled, they're able to kill. But the reason that they are able to kill is because they have the access to guns. And we're not limiting that. And I think that a big thing that, I mean, I just was thinking about right now is that if you are pro-gun, then I don't understand why, like, the three contingents that I was talking to you about earlier, you know, like over the age of 21, you know, ban assault weapons and universal background checks. Yes, but I don't understand, if you were a responsible gun owner, why you would not be able to follow those three contingents, because those are fairly reasonable. I mean, if you are a gun owner, you shouldn't have anything in your background that should, you know, set off an alarm or something. You should be over the age of 21, and I don't understand why you would need an assault weapon in the first place.
If I can add to that.
Sure.
So if you look at any of the recent tragedies, most of them have been gun violence and, like, related, right? And there's a reason for that. It's sure, maybe C4 or a grenade or other military-grade weapons would be more effective at killing more people. But you see people constantly going back to guns and using guns to commit these atrocious crimes. And that's because guns right now are the perfect balance of availability and lethality. And so they're very efficient at killing. And that's why people choose them over, say, a knife or over a bomb, because bombs, it's kind of hard. They're not very available. So if you have something that's available to every citizen, if it's a high-capacity weapon that shoots upwards of 400 rounds per minute, and you can kill literally dozens of people in a very, very short amount of time, obviously the mentally ill people, the people who want to harm our society, want to harm other people and children, people, they're going to go to guns because they're the most efficient at killing. And of course, if there's something that was better at killing people, more available, then I'm sure that they'd be going to those. And we wouldn't be in this position right now, and we'd trying to be opposed to those and calling for reform for those types of weapons.
But right now, you feel like your energies are best spent focusing on the guns. We got to have more gun control, and if we do that, we'll limit some of these shootings. Is that basically your theory?
I'd say at least mandating background checks on all gun transactions, because as you probably know about, say, the gun show loophole. Do you?
I'm familiar with that, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically unlicensed gun dealers.
I've seen the video where the kid goes and he tries to buy cigarettes and they say no, and he tries to go buy liquor and he says no, but then he goes into a gun shop and he goes, yeah, here's your gun. I don't know, you seen that video?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
But basically,
all right, let me just, because we're going to wrap up, but Tyler, what are your thoughts? You might have some different thoughts on how to solve the problem, which I think we all agree on. We just can't have people going into schools gunning down kids like we've seen everywhere. But what are some of the resolutions to this that you see?
Right. Well, obviously we can all agree there is a problem. The fact that there, I think, been 3 school mass shootings in the country. You hear the number 18, but that has been debunked as an exaggeration, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with the reports that there have been 18 school shootings.
Yeah, I have, and I actually went in and looked it up, and actually the big ones were Columbine, Virginia Tech, which I think you talked about, one in Northern Illinois, one in Oakland, California, the Newtown tragedy, Santa Monica, California, and then the one in Roseburg, Oregon, 10 people were shot, and then Parkland, Florida. Those are school shootings that had more than 2 victims. Many of these are kind of, just like crimes and stuff. But
I think he's
that's what
talking
we're
about how this year CNN posted an article where on average there was 1 school shooting a week, and the way they calculated that might not have been, it might have been misleading.
Okay, well, be that as it may, 1 is 1 too many. I think we're talking about Parkland. I think we're talking about Newtown, which certainly hits home to those around us, and how best to combat that.
Yeah.
Your view, let's get rid of the guns. They're really bad things, and if there weren't any of these guns, these guys couldn't shoot everyone, in a sense. Your thought?
Well, just in regards to the numbers I was pulling, it actually wasn't from either of the things that you guys were thinking of. There's an organization called, I think, Every Town Against Gun Violence or something of that name that reported there were 18 school shootings in 2018 alone, and this was like last month after Parkland. They published this number, and it's completely factually wrong. The Washington Post wrote about it, and there are only 3 of those 18 school shootings were actual school shootings that we would consider like a Parkland scenario.
Okay, but what's your answer to that?
Sure.
If it isn't gun control, what do you think?
Sure. So when we talk about gun control, the reason I say I am not in favor of gun control is because usually when you hear gun control, you think of banning guns or limiting which guns people can buy or raising the age to 21, and I don't agree with those. I do agree with universal background checks, which are actually a federal mandate. In order to purchase a gun, you do have to go through a universal background check. I think that these can be improved, and Matt has actually proposed a lot of really good ideas, like having family references and forcing people to show a receipt as proof of ownership of a gun safe before you can actually purchase a weapon, because that could have prevented something like Sandy Hook, where the man actually was not old enough to purchase a gun, but he stole his mother's weapon and then used that to kill people. Really, to get into my opinions on what is the most effective way to reduce this gun violence in schools is to see, as you see in Maryland, better security in the schools, officers who are trained and equipped with the proper firearms. Like, I'm not sure what weapon he had, but it was obviously very effective in preventing any deaths. In fact, the only person who died in that shooting was the shooter himself, and he inflicted 2 injuries. That's a lot better than 17 deaths, as you saw in Parkland, and you can definitely attribute that to the school resource officer, as he was called, and just the armed security at that school was obviously the most effective way to prevent any tragedy from occurring there. And that's one of the many effective ways, I think, that things that can be implemented into this gun debate that can actually do something about it.
Excellent. Natalie, I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to have the lightning round. You can say the last word, but you get the second to last word.
Okay, so for me, a bigger kind of overarching theme for this is I think that it's just absolutely terrifying how willing people are to have their own government disarm its people and to take away their guns or tell them what they can have is like a means of self-defense. Because for me, I think that it's strange that people approach like a tragedy like Parkland or Columbine or something like that with looking at the tool the messed up person used to kill all those people instead of looking at what gave that person the motive in the first place. Because I think that the gun, like, it's not a gun problem. I think it's a culture problem. A culture problem and a problem with like the people of the country, and you want to stop people who have those motives instead of just try to make some sort of effort to limit how much damage they can do or what means they use, because I think if someone wants to hurt people, they will find a way to do it. And so limiting the guns themselves will overall just negatively affect law-abiding citizens the most out of everyone.
All right, lightning round, we'll start with you. Last thoughts. Really quick.
So whenever people talk about banning guns or banning assault weapons, like, I don't think they realize how many guns there are in America. There's 320 million of them. And if we were to ban all gun sales, like today, I don't think that would even stop mass shootings in the future, because that would just create a black market. And people just obtain those guns illegally. Whenever talking about gun control, we have to keep in mind that there are so many guns in America, and that maybe some of these laws that we're proposing won't be as effective just due to the sheer number of guns.
Garrett?
maybe not all these laws will work, and maybe not everything we're pushing for is the best, but we have to do something, because my friends, my family are scared to leave their house to go to school, and that is not an acceptable way to live.
Last thought.
I'm gonna go
We
off
started with you, we're ending with you.
I'm gonna go off Garrett's. I think that he's right. Something needs to be done, and I can see all their points and perspectives, but I think that it's kind of a perspective of how are you going to change mental health, and how does this? A person only has power if they That's such a strong power to have, the power to kill, and I don't think that your average. As I said before, I'm not saying take away the guns from all the citizens, and I think that's what so many people are saying, that all of us gun violence prevention people are, but we're not. We're just saying some simple rules that we think would limit a lot of deaths, and say that they don't, and that's kind of a common debate right now. These things won't do anything, but I think that why not give them a try, and why not? After 9/11, we created a whole department of Homeland Security. We haven't done anything, and so many kids have died. Elementary schoolers are dying.
I appreciate very much you guys coming in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I didn't know what to expect. I just Facebooked you guys, but I think you really framed the argument very well.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank
No,
you.
I really like
you.
it very much. And by the way, say hi to Mark Boughton as you walk out, because he's the man. He could be the next governor of the state of Connecticut. But thanks so much for coming in. So make sure you get his number. All right, I just want to thank these students for coming in. How refreshing was that? Is that not an encouraging thing to see these young people really spontaneously grappling with some of these issues that are facing us adult population, and somehow we haven't been able to figure it out? My answer to the thing, I like the idea of this resource officer like in Maryland. I think it's a microcosm of what might work if we harden the targets, if we have better security, and I believe we need armed personnel. We protect our banks. We protect our sporting events. We protect businesses. I'm a painting contractor. When I go down into Manhattan, to get into some of these buildings down in Manhattan, my gosh, you have to have security, metal detectors, forget about it. It's much more than that. But it's just heartening to me to see these young people grappling with these issues. And if you really look at it, they're on the front line. They're the ones that are seeing, this stuff happen. And for us here in Fairfield County, it's not an academic issue. This happened like 8 miles from where I'm sitting right now. This really happened. And I think we can do a better job, and we can do a better job protecting our kids, and I think we can do a lot better job protecting these schools. And I think what we saw unfold in Maryland just recently, where you had a security resource officer, or whatever they call him, I call him a good guy with a gun. This kid came out, and for whatever reason, whatever existential angst he was going through, he was going to gun down a bunch of people. It didn't last long. Boom, boom, he was taken out. And it averted another tragedy. There's a movie out, I think it's like Paris 517, same scenario. In that case, you had an Islamic terrorist on a train going from Paris to somewhere, but 3 rosy-cheeked Americans took him out. They didn't even have a gun, they took him out. Mark Boughton.
Marty Heiser.
I am thrilled that you are here.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in.
Well, thanks for having me.
And how about those young people?
I thought they were outstanding. Everybody's got good points, right? It's a very complex, difficult, challenging issue, and I think everybody brought their perspective to it. And if we can just get Congress to communicate like that, and if we can get our legislature to communicate like that, I think a lot of problems will get solved in this world. So good job.
It is, and it's funny because actually last week, I tried to, I'm like, we make this up as you go along. I don't know if you know that. There isn't a lot of,
It's all planned out.
It's all planned out. But I was trying to get a bunch of guys to come on last week, couldn't get anyone. Then this week I'm like, well, let's try one more time, because they had the walkout last week right about this time. But anyways, let's switch gears. Connecticut politics, you're looking great.
Thanks.
I hear great news out on the campaign trail. The money's raised.
Yep.
People are saying you're the front runner. What are you hearing out there?
Very similar to that. The biggest piece for us, as you know, Marty, has always been, well, can he raise the money? So we pretty much put that to bed by completing that process in December of last year. So we're ready to file. We're going to file March 31st for our grant. You don't get the money yet. You get a nice letter saying you are qualified. Now go get your 15% at the convention or more, and we'll give you your money. So that's good.
Oh, so you still got to wait for the convention.
You do.
Okay,
That piece has been done. And now we're out doing delegate outreach and working on rounding up delegates and making sure that we can win the convention. We think we've got a shot to win the convention. There are about 422 candidates running, but
Yeah, that
we
seems
seem
like
to have
it.
a pretty solid base of people that are sticking with us. And, you know, frankly, we've had some ups and downs, particularly, you know, the last couple of weeks, but I feel great and things are going really well.
Yeah, give us 30 seconds on your health, because you look like you could run the Boston Marathon
Yeah,
right
probably
now.
should be doing that stuff. So this past
you're doing
summer,
great.
you know, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor,
Right.
and I had a very serious operation. My risk was all front loaded. If I got through the operation, I would be fine because it wasn't cancerous.
Yeah.
Thank God.
It was like a cyst or something, right?
Yeah, bigger than a lemon. So they finally took that out, and things went well. And then last week, I'd been really working hard and hustling, and just didn't take care of myself the way I should. I didn't hydrate properly. I didn't eat for 2 days because you're so busy running around, you know, talking to people. And frankly, that triggered a seizure. And I was taken to the hospital, stayed overnight, was let go the next morning, and everything's fine, I'm good.
All right.
But it's scary. If you're in the room and you see these things, they are very scary. As you know, I used to teach high school. I taught for 14 years, and probably half a dozen kids in my time had a seizure in my room.
Wow.
And so I've had some training, you know, with that kind of case while you're waiting for the nurse and the EMTs to come down, and you know, it can be very scary for people. So easy for me. I don't remember anything, but I came out of it, really quickly, and everybody at UConn Health was very pleased with how quickly I responded. So we're fine. We're not likely to happen again.
All right. Well, you look great. Now, let me ask you about issues facing Connecticut.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when I hear on the news, the economy's going great nationwide, unemployment among minorities at an all-time low, the stock market's going up, although we had a rough day today, but growth at 3% and above, and then I think of the Connecticut economy, and I feel like it's lagging behind, except there's this nice little island of prosperity called Danbury in the greater region, because somehow you've been able to keep, Praxair, that Italian company you got in that put those condos right next to Richfield, but we'll listen to it. But you've somehow been able to do wonders here in the local economy.
Right.
But what is it going to take to get Connecticut working again?
Yeah.
And not where we're actually one of 2 or 3 states that's actually losing
That's
population.
right. Yeah. So
what's the answer?
You bring out. Look, that's the best argument for my candidacy is that I'm the only one that has real-world experience at running an economy, at least providing the assistance to an economy. Private industry runs the economy, and being able to keep people employed and encourage business development and people to stay here. And that's the story that I tell every night out on the campaign trail. And that's not a story anybody else can tell, right? Because everybody else talks in theory. I talk in cold, hard reality of what the day is going to be. So Danbury really is in many ways a model for that. And we need to do some of the things we've done in Danbury for the state of Connecticut. We need to recognize that business is here as a friend that employs people, that we need to support business in Connecticut, and encourage businesses to stay here, to come here, and to expand here. We also need to do some big, what I call big, bold, and brave proposals. Our biggest, boldest, bravest proposal is to eliminate the state income tax over the next 10 years. It'll take 10 years to do that. But if we can do that, then we can restore ourselves to where we used to be when we had growth in our economy. Now, since we've implemented the state income tax, we've had zero growth in the economy since 1991. In fact, since 2004, we've had negative growth. So we know that way doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And we know when we didn't have an income tax, that was sort of the one little thing that we had, right? The one marketing tool that we had for people to say, hey, you want to live in Connecticut? They don't have the state income tax.
That's
in New
why I
Hampshire.
moved here.
That's right.
I was renting a place in Chappaqua. We moved out here from Chicago.
That's right.
But my wife says, oh, if we move up to Danbury, we won't have to pay state income
That's
tax.
right.
It was like $3,000 less for us a year.
Right.
We move up here. Weichert gets in, the son of a gun. I'm out there in Hartford with my little tea bag. I did everything I could possibly could.
Me too. I was
come
there.
home. I come home. It's winter. My wife is crying at the kitchen table, and she says, what? She said, I had put money aside to buy our kids, a snowsuit, new snowsuit for the winter, but the state income tax has taken that up. And I was like, and that was, I mean, that's not good.
And when you look at the outflow, migration of people leaving Connecticut, and you ask them where they're going, and we've been doing this through polling and some other focus groups and things like that, 99% of those people are going to non-income income tax states.
Yeah.
Be they Texas, Tennessee, Florida being the number one by far, but Tennessee is actually a pretty solid number 2.
They can't build roads fast enough down there.
That's right. So, so it just says we want that kind of growth, we want that kind of robust economy. We've got to do what the 9 other states in the United States of America are doing, and we can achieve the same results. Now listen, this requires to do this, a complete reorganization and redesign of state government. But the time is right to do that. This is our moment. It can't get any worse. So our argument to the public is we've tried it that way. Let's do it this way. And yes, we can provide the basic services that you're accustomed to. Of course, we're going to support our schools. Of course, we're going to support our seniors. But let's take this time now to downsize from 55,000 state employees to a more manageable 30,000 state employees. Let's take this time to be able to collapse and condense the 76 departments that report to the governor's office to 20 departments that report to the governor's office. So there's opportunity here for us, and we ought to take advantage of it.
All right. Caller, we have the future governor of the state of Connecticut, Mark Boughton. Do you have a question for the mayor? Caller, are you there? This is your big moment, caller. Going once, going twice. All right, call back if you'd like to ask Mark Boughton a question. He might have been too intimidated by you. You're a rather intimidating guy.
No.
But in a minute, we're going to be joined by Hope Wise, the newly minted chairman of the Republican Party in Connecticut, as well as Dave Straight. He's a interested party, and they're going to have some more questions for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what are you seeing out there? I mean, what is the current occupant of the governor's mansion is at a popularity rate of what? It's like somewhere below like car salesman.
Yeah,
and,
it's like mid-20s.
Mid-20s.
It's not good, yeah.
Okay, so but the theory then is that, well, gosh, we've tried this. I mean, Democrats run this whole state. Every congressman, every senator, and it's just not working. It would seem like that would be enough to say, hey, let the pendulum swing. Let's give the other guy a shot. But what do we?
Yeah, you can't. So you can't run that race. You can't just assume that people out there are going to vote for you because you're not the current governor. Republicans have tried that through 2 cycles.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. What we've got to do is go back to the big, bold, and brave, and we've got to have a positive vision of what Connecticut can be, and then we've got to rally our residents around it, like-minded Democrats, unaffiliated voters, as well as Republicans, and say, this is the direction we need to go in. When I become governor, I'll have on the desks of our legislature within 90 days our reorganization plan that everybody can chew on for the rest of the session. They don't have to enact it that session, just chew on it. We'll have public hearings, public input. We'll have input from our legislators, obviously, as well as interested parties and stakeholders in the state, business community, et cetera. And we'll take those ideas and we're going to flesh them out, and we're going to have a phased approach to being able to do some of the things that we need to do to make Connecticut the place it ought to be. Number one being, though, the phase out of the state income tax. That's my one ask, and that's not something we'll compromise on. But in terms of other stuff, people got ideas, we want to hear them. And there are tons of great ideas on how to save money, how to become more efficient. Many of them come from the state employees themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm going to spend time listening to them. And I think they kind of owe us $300 million worth of savings. That was the first agreement, right? Didn't they promise that through the suggestion box we would get $300 million worth of savings? So I think that we want to participate in that. And then let's understand that at the end of 4 years, if my approval rating is 20% and I maybe can't run again or in a position because of the tough decisions I've made up to that point, I'll know that Connecticut is pointed in the right direction. You'll know that, right? And I actually think people will return you to office because of that, because you made the tough decisions. But if not, we all can be comfortable that we made the tough choices to be able to begin our turnaround, which isn't going to happen in 1 year or 2 years. It's going to take a solid 4 years or maybe longer to be able to do that.
2 questions, 2 concepts. One is tolls, and then the other is a circular firing squad that has been the Republican Party here in Connecticut for a long time. How do we avoid that circular firing squad where there's so many candidates running and they're just shooting at each other, and we come out of it divided, and then when the Republican loses, they say, oh yeah, of course you lost, my guy should have been in there, and then we would have been fine. And I've been hearing this now for a number of cycles, if it's the congressional seat in the 4th District or now now with Governor, how do we solve that problem? And Hope Wise, I want you to join us too, but go right ahead.
Well, I would argue that that does happen, right? So what we've got to understand is that once the primary is over, we're all on the same team. I certainly have pledged to support, if it's not me, the nominee. I'm fixing to make it me, but if it's not, I'll do what should be done as a Republican.
Do we get one of those like they had in the Republican primary for president, where everyone said, will you support the eventual nominee?
I think everybody's pretty much committed to that. I'm fairly optimistic about that because
I mean, you see these guys all the time, right?
I think people understand that this is our moment. I mean, if we don't win in 18, we'll never win the governor's office. It'll never happen because of all of the tailwinds that you've talked about. But it's also important that you paint the picture of the state of what it ought to look like under my leadership or whoever the candidate is leadership. So I think there are opportunities there, and I think people recognize that. I've made a personal decision not to go after other candidates. We don't do oppo on people. People hand us stuff. I'm not interested in tearing things down. Right? Anybody can do that. I'm more interested in building the state and building a vision for the state. And I want to talk about me and my candidacy. I don't want to talk about you. In terms of when we're out there on the road. Representative
John Fry spoke at our town committee meeting the other day, and he spoke about what the Democrats are proposing in the forms of tolls. Yeah. Now this is like something like twice as many tolls as Rhode Island or twice as many as Massachusetts with half the population, something like that. It sounded obscene, like it's going to cost you $57 to go from Danbury to Hartford to get an ice cream cone. Something crazy like that.
If it's congestion pricing, which is the only way you can implement tolling, you could theoretically pay $47 to $57 and a high volume time period to get from Danbury to Hartford, one way.
I was joking about that. That's for real.
No, wow. that's for real. That's that model and the mathematical formula that goes with it is so bad for people in terms of what you're going to have to pay that it doesn't make sense. Look, we do need a way to fund our capital improvement projects. We have a way. It's called the gas tax, right? The highest, third highest in the world or in the nation. We have taken that money and spent it on everything but roads, bridges, and road improvement and repair. So now we've got to say, well, that's not going to work. If we're going to create a true capital program with a capital fund, then we've got to be able to get it out of the hands of the legislature, because they'll monkey around with it all the time. That's the quote lockbox that you keep hearing about. But also, you have to go to what I advocate for is a project-specific financing program. So you can call it tax incremental financing. There's a number of different names for it. But basically, the concept is you want to rebuild the mixed master in Waterbury, then you assess communities around the mixed master via an addition onto the sales tax of not a percentage but $1. So $5 for every sale, for every 100, for example, goes towards this project. When the project is done, the tax goes away. The money can only be used to fund that project. And then what you do is, based off of that revenue stream, go and borrow, do the project, and then pay it off over 10 years, 50, depending on the scope and the complexity of the project. You don't have to do them all. I'm talking about the big ones that have to be done. And people aren't afraid to be able to throw $1 or $5 at where they know where their money's specifically going, versus handing it to Hartford and it goes into the black hole. We never know what happened to it. Everybody scratches their head. And I've had that experience in Danbury, and it's been successful. And there are methodologies you can use to do that, but you can't do that until you change the culture of the legislature and get people to understand that they can't just spend. That we have real needs, and those transportation needs are tied directly to our economic viability.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, New York's kind of doing a good job with that.
They are.
Dave Straight and Hope Wise, the new chairman of the Republican Party in Ridgefield, are here at my insistence, because they have they're good nutmeg staters that are
That's
here.
right.
They're staying and fighting. They're not cutting and running.
Good.
And Dave, what thoughts do you have for the future governor of the state of Connecticut?
So Mayor, he flatters me because 3 other people canceled. That's the only reason I'm here. I go through this every week. I don't know why I keep putting up with it. But yeah, I got my hat's off to you for throwing your hat into the ring, because anybody that wants to go work on Asylum Street,
Yeah, right.
I kind of admire that.
Got a point there.
Wow.
Every time, that's the best part about driving through Hartford for me, is I pass Asylum Street and I think, oh, that's where all the politicians
Where
are.
they belong.
Perfect.
Well, it's interesting because the fastest growing business in Connecticut today is the moving business.
That's
and
right.
it's people moving out of Connecticut to say, states like Tennessee, they have no taxes. kind of like Connecticut used to be. And remember there was a day back in the 1990 era back then when you had no state income taxes there? What was happening? Companies were moving to Connecticut left. They were moving out of all the neighboring states here. Now what do we have? People leaving here to Massachusetts? We've turned this city upside, or this state upside down. Now I told you before that my suggestion is we need to merge with Rhode Island and cut costs, but nobody's open to doing that. I thought that was a pretty good idea.
Your Honor?
I want to take back the notch.
Okay.
A little notchy thing there. We're going to invade, cut that off from
Yeah, I saw that. That's Massachusetts.
So the real challenge for you, so I like your ideas, and I argue about it, and this is not here to suck up. I do think you and Joe Markley are the two top politicians and candidate, most to offer. The real problem in Connecticut, though, is legacy costs.
Right.
How do you cut them? How do you cut them and get elected?
A couple of things. Under the sovereign immunity clause of our state constitution, one could argue that we can take specific benefits that are articulated in the collective bargaining agreements and put them in statute. So my argument would be health care and pension would move out of the contracts and move it into state law, and then it would be up to the legislators to negotiate that and to vote on it and to hold them accountable for the direction they're taking us. I would also say to you that people and there are candidates out there talking about pension reform, and I don't think we need pension reform. Frankly, I think we're going to need to eliminate the current pension system as designed. Reform just simply means you're nibbling around the edges. Bottom line is that we just can't afford future liability costs going forward unless we do some kind of wholesale change and move to a 401k style program where employees can contribute, and we might even be able to develop a hybrid where we'll match a percentage like we do in Danbury. So I think those there are things to do that. The tough part is, what do you do about the guy or gal that's been working for the state for 30 years, has planned on this particular kind of retirement, and at last second you go back and tell them, sorry, you're not getting that. Right? I mean, that's really where the rubber is going to meet the road, because that's where you're so front-loaded on expense. Now, what we've done, and it's been very successful, is we've gone and we've bought people out of their pension. So we'll go up to the employee and
when
say,
you say we, Danbury.
Danbury does, right? So we
I
say,
thought you personally wrote the check.
No. But with the one caveat that our pension fund has been fully funded, because we made good strategic decisions and made the tough decisions in terms of money, but we actually have paid people to get out of the system, and that has bent the cost curve later down the line. And you could take the money pre-tax, you could take the money and go to Vegas and spend it on anything you want, you can go pay college tuition, whatever you want. We don't care. But once you're out of the system, you have signed the fact that you no longer have any claims to a pension system that gets smaller and smaller each year. And that's how you bend the cost.
So can I just put in a plug for the mayor for just a second here?
By all
This is an
means.
anecdotal story. I don't know if this is true or not.
Okay.
But there's a little sandwich shop called Captain's right around the corner.
I love it. Great little shop. Yeah.
Right. So this is a story that hit my ears. Someone said, hey, Mayor Boughton, I love Mayor Boughton. I said, really, why is that? They said, well, we were trying and struggling, and we're trying to get this shop opened, and we're going to all these town hall meetings. This is dragging out. And so this issue comes up in one of the meetings, and the mayor walks in and says, what's on the topic? Captains? Okay, you're done. Next topic. And in an instant, you got that put through.
That's right.
There you go.
There you go.
Hope, do you have similar stories about Mayor Boughton doing it? I understand he has a cape and blue tights. That's occasionally he'll come in and just slash regulation and bureaucracy.
I'm not telling tales.
But he's a masked
out of
man, so
school.
no one knows who it is. But he
I
just
don't know. You know what I did want to ask you, though, Mark, and someone brought this up the other night at a town committee meeting, that they felt that this proposal for tolls was going to go through, and soon. Now, if that's the case, and I believe they were quoted as saying it's going to come out to like 10 cents a mile. We're a third of the size of New Jersey, and yet New Jersey pays 4.6 cents a mile, which, when you think about it, it's astonishing. But if that is the case, if there is a vote, what can the next governor do, if anything, to help us get out of this?
Well, they just had the vote today, and it made it out of committee, but it has not made it through the House or the Senate. And I think there'll be rather contentious votes, because then that's really where the rubber meets the road for those legislators that are going to have to live with that, particularly those that represent fairly conservative districts in Connecticut.
Okay.
And I think what you're saying, and what I'm hearing from you, And your frustration is that it's almost, like a runaway train.
It is,
That,
yeah.
people are saying, it's happening, that's it, too bad. And we, the people, led by a new governor, a new legislature, can unwind
You
those
can.
kinds of decisions. Yes, no legislature can tie the hands of a future legislature by any decision that they make. So it's in our state constitution. So we're not necessarily bound. Obviously, we have to vote to unwind it.
Yes, but it can
and
be
repeal the
done.
statute, but it absolutely can be done, or just never implemented.
Wow.
Which is what I just would never implement it. I throw it out because the only way tolls can work is through congestion pricing. There's no other way you can do it. And congestion pricing will lead to the kind of numbers that Marty was throwing around earlier in terms of you don't just throw a quarter into the bin and away you go.
Across the bridge or something.
Right. Every 10 miles you're assessed. If there's high volume traffic, if it's at 5 o'clock, it's triple the assessment to go through. That's why you can end up spending $50 to get from here to Hartford at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon or
Astonishing.
8 to 9 in the morning. I mean, it's absurd. Partly because you've already paid for this in the
Sure.
form of the highest gas tax, but secondly, because that money, I guarantee you, will never go to pay for any capital improvements, any transportation improvements. They'll spend it on every other wacky program that they can come up with.
So you already know this because you know everything.
I know everything.
Yeah. But so about 4 weeks ago, the Supreme Court of Rhode Island ruled that the state legislative body could break legacy contracts.
Sure.
So
You can.
and ultimately, that's, whether we want to admit it or not, that's the end game, right? Because we don't want to look like Illinois.
Right. No, I think you can. I agree. Listen, I agree. Obviously, I agree with the Supreme Court, but I also think our state constitution would allow us to do that as well. It'll end up in the Connecticut Supreme Court. However, I would hope that through a combination of negotiation, being creative and innovative, we wouldn't necessarily have to leave that 34 or 35-year employee out in the cold and just say, we're breaking our contract, sorry you don't get your pension. I don't know if that's, there's an equity and fairness there for me personally as a leader that I'm not really comfortable with. But I can't sacrifice our taxpayers and safety and education and everything else to simply fund legacy benefits the rest forever. So there's a balance that you have to strike there, but I think you win that case if you go to court. I think you're absolutely right.
On new state
Plus, you
employees,
get,
are there?
okay. You also you got to get it out of the state courts here in Connecticut. You got to get it into federal court. So I think you go to the U.S. Supreme Court, you can win that. But go ahead.
On the new state employees, do they have a defined contribution or defined benefit?
No, they're still on
pension
this defined benefit program.
plan? Nobody's on defined benefit.
I understand that.
It's like a dinosaur.
I understand that.
Now, what about their health? Do they have a health savings account, or is it just?
No, they're still doing the old
None?
PPO.
So in the town of Ridgefield,
Yeah.
through a brilliant move by a long-standing Board of Finance, we moved everything from defined contribution for defined benefit to defined contribution. For all new employees, but then you had attrition for existing employees. They're grandfathered in, so they're whole. So that 35-year employee you're talking about that's counting on it,
And you at least stop the bleeding.
you at least stop the bleeding,
Right.
and then the new wave comes in. Same things with health savings account, though, with the teachers, for example, they gave them the option. We had this Fitzpatrick guy that went in there and showed them, look, you're gonna come out ahead with this self savings,
And more money
and,
in your
and it went
paycheck,
from 90% weren't, and now it's down to like something like 90% are in the health savings accounts, which saved us millions. And that's just little old Ridgefield.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could do that.
I'm in a health savings account.
Yeah.
And you know I've had a share of medical issues this year. I've got great coverage, great doctors, and there's more money in my paycheck every week because a plan is less money.
Yeah, and so there's built-in benefits, but I mean the thought of this defined contribution, defined benefits. You talk about getting the arc of the curve to come down. You just got to play ball with these guys and say, look, it's going to be a defined contribution, not benefit.
That's right.
And that's what it's going to be for the new guys. You know,
That's right.
and
And don't forget part of your legacy benefit, aside from the state teachers retirement board, that's a whole other issue, is a retiree medical. And the retiree medical is probably a $10 to $15 billion hole as well. And we don't have retiree medical anymore in the city of Danbury. So when you retire out, if you're not 65, which you can go on Medicare, you can buy COBRA for your medical plan if you want to stay on our plan. That's it. That's what you get. And you have had to have worked for 25 years. Wow. So because you have to start accruing for that too. That's a whole other hole in your budgeting. So, but these are tough decisions that local governments have made.
I think gotta make.
Like me,
Yeah.
it's not fun. Our employees get it. They
Forget
understood.
about local. What about just kitchen table stuff?
That's
the
right.
average citizen.
That's right.
We're kind of in the lightning round, real quick.
Okay.
Caller, do you have a question for the future mayor, or rather, the future governor of the state of Connecticut?
Yeah, Marty, it sounds like you guys are talking about universal health care for all, and I agree with that, and that's something we need to do, because we spend more on this country on health care than virtually any other country, and we rank like 22nd. I mean, our health care system is abysmal. But my main reason for calling, I want to make sure that Dave Straight is going to be live on my show on Who's Telling the Truth Monday night at 7 o'clock.
All right.
Yeah.
I will check with his agent. You know, he wants just green M&Ms. He wants a Swiss masseuse, and you got to have the deli tray. That's all in the contract. All right, thanks. Because it's true. Did you meet Sven? It's the masseuse out there. That's what he insists
It's a
on.
lightning round.
Lightning round, yeah.
Oh, it's
Real
been-
quick, then Hope real quick.
Okay,
and-
so there's a reason that there are no federal unions, right? It's illegal to have a federal union. It's for the same reason we should have no state unions, right? Because it's kind of like mob rule and it's like taxation without representation. Just is. I think what you need to do, like teachers unions, why should there be a teachers union? What do you protect? Unions were meant to protect the workers, right? What are you protecting them against? What? The state? They work for the state. Why should you have a state union? Step number one, eliminate state unions, you eliminate mob rule. Just tell
Plus, if you merge with Rhode Island, I think you could implement
them.
it.
Cut costs in half.
Hope, your final thoughts.
My final thoughts are...
Question.
No, I actually want to make a little statement about Mayor Boughton. Having just come in and become the chairman of the Republican Town Committee, I can tell you that our town committee is very excited about Mark. Very excited about being the neighbor to the future governor.
I think Ridgefield will make out very well.
I think so too. And that's one of the reasons that we're very excited about you, the entire group.
I don't think you'll have to worry about
Chicken in every pot. Yeah,
Every
Mark Boughton's
pot.
our new guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the final word. Look into one of these cameras and tell people why they should vote for you.
Well, listen, we have been crisscrossing this state. We have a vision for what Connecticut ought to be about and what it should be about. And part of that is harkening back to what it was, but elections are always about looking to the future. And so we're excited about Connecticut's future. As I said at the beginning of this discussion, we're going to be big, we're going to be bold, and we're going to be brave. Love for have you jump on board. Go to our website, Boughton2018.com. If we still got one more storm coming, I will come shovel your driveway and clean your windows if you'll support us. God bless you, and thanks again, Marty, and Hope and everybody
Thank
for
you.
having us on.
Great. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Dave, thanks for coming in. And you'll get your massage afterwards. And Hope, thank you. And
Thanks, Marty.
I echo what she says. I think Ridgefield is definitely in the column for Mark Boughton, and we're really forward.
Vote for Mark.
Vote for Mark.
You know,
Vote for Mark.
we've launched a lot of campaigns from right here.
Right
Everybody
here.
announces
Right
they
here.
always win. It's a good omen.
Yeah, it's good.
Bright future.
Well, thanks for joining us, and a real shout out to those students from Richfield High School and Newtown High School. Really appreciate you coming in and just sharing what your thoughts are on all of this. You don't walk alone. We're with you together. And next week, we're going to have another show. I have no idea who's going to be on or what we're going to be talking about. Let's see what the week brings. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Good night.
They love you over there.